My parents worshipped my twin sister for being beautiful and ignored me completely. When I demanded an explanation, my dad said, "We tried putting you up for adoption. Now, they've lost both daughters, and my sister and I have rebuilt our lives together." My stepdaughter threatened my son, assaulted my daughter, and vandalized our home. When I pleaded with my husband to see the truth, he laughed and said, "You're hysterical." I stayed silent. That was 3 years ago. Last night, she was taken away by the police, hands in cuffs. I have 2 children, Sarah and Aiden. 9 years ago, my late husband passed away in a fatal car crash. I was devastated. I was afraid for my kids to grow up without a father, and I was afraid to be alone. 5 years ago, I met my now husband and his daughter Elizabeth at a friend's housewarming party. I was hesitant to date again, but I took things slow, making sure he was a good man to be around my kids. I discussed my kids' feelings with them along every important milestone and made sure they were comfortable with my husband and my stepdaughter. When he proposed, and I spoke to my kids about how they felt, only one request, the promise, was made. I would make sure that my kids and I had time together, just the 3 of us still. I agreed to take my children out twice a month, just the 3 of us, with exceptions if need be. As my kids remember their father, and Elizabeth's mother was still in her life, we made a rule that neither of us would try to be parents to our stepkids. We are responsible for our bio kids. This was discussed with all the children together. Our kids are also allowed to choose how they feel about one another, whether or not they wish for a sibling relationship or something else. It's not up for my husband and I to decide. Back to present time. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. The kids adjusted well to our new normal, and I made sure to keep our traditions alive. I still take my kids out twice a month for adventures and do activities with Elizabeth too. My husband came to me yesterday saying we needed to talk about how Sarah and Aiden treat Elizabeth. He listed instances of exclusionary behavior. Sarah driving only Aiden, not inviting Elizabeth on her birthday trip, buying gifts only for Aiden, and both kids doing activities Elizabeth doesn't enjoy. He blamed me for setting this example with my promise to my kids and demanded I treat Elizabeth like my own. I refused, reminding him of our agreement and that he doesn't act as a father to my kids. I spoke with all 3 kids separately last night and was shocked by what I learned. At today's family meeting, Elizabeth spoke first, listing how excluded she felt. Movie nights without her, refusing rides to school, Sarah lying about where she was going, being left out of group chats, and feeling they hated her. She said she deserved a parent too, and it wasn't fair we got to be a family while she didn't. Sarah asked if Elizabeth honestly felt less part of the family. Before Elizabeth could answer, my husband had Sarah read her list. Sarah bluntly detailed Elizabeth's behavior, breaking into their rooms, stealing their stuff, forcing herself into Sarah's friend group, threatening to tell on them if excluded, ruining Sarah's makeup, telling my kids they should be happy their father died because now they have her dad, making inappropriate comments about anime characters, insisting Aiden had a crush on her, getting handsy with Aiden, throwing fits when losing games, expecting me to do everything for her, flirting with Sarah's boyfriend because sisters share everything, and being jealous of their accomplishments. When I asked Aiden if Elizabeth was really trying to touch him, he hesitated, then said yes. Elizabeth denied it, but Sarah cut her off, calling her disgusting and spoiled, saying their friends only tolerated her because Elizabeth forced them to, and warning if she ever tried anything with Aiden again, they'd make her life hell. I stopped the threats. Elizabeth argued it wasn't fair, that she and Sarah had similar interests, but was treated worse because she was ugly. Sarah said it had nothing to do with looks. Elizabeth was just a bad person. Elizabeth brought up how Sarah excluded her and refused to accept her and her father as family, saying they both lost a parent. Sarah replied, "My dad is dead. He's never coming back. Your mom is in jail. You speak with her daily. It's not the same." Elizabeth said, "It is the same. I share my dad. You're just bitching that you have to share your mom now." Sarah retorted, "At least my dad didn't choose to leave me. Your mom had a choice and I can see why she made it." Elizabeth slapped Sarah. Aiden punched Elizabeth. My husband shoved Aiden into a wall mirror. I screamed at my husband to keep his hands off my children while telling my kids to pack. They ran off with Elizabeth following, pounding on their doors, crying. After much yelling, my husband slapped me. Sarah started screaming at Elizabeth, and I found them fighting in my bedroom because Sarah was packing for me. I told Sarah to wait in the car. I packed while my husband and Elizabeth screamed at me, then left. Sarah was in the driver's seat, so I let her drive away before switching with her. The paramedics rushed him away while I followed in my car, my hands still shaking from the shock of what had just happened. I spoke to Sarah and asked why she didn't bring any of this up previously. She told me that Elizabeth only started acting like that after husband had already proposed, and both she and Aiden wanted me to be happy because they'd seen how depressed I was after my late husband died. This obviously broke my heart. I told her that they are my happiness. Sarah argued and said that since I'd made so many sacrifices, it's only fair that they did too. I promised her that she never needs to sacrifice anything for me, as I am their mother. Sarah started crying, apologizing, and just saying how she never meant for me to lose another husband, and that she never would have let Aiden get hurt. I kept reassuring her the whole ride to our hotel. My kids are asleep now. I'm scared. Neither husband nor Elizabeth has contacted me. I'm not sure if I want them to. I kept checking my phone even though I knew they wouldn't call. The hotel room felt too small with all 3 of us crammed in here, but I couldn't afford 2 rooms, not with everything happening so fast. Sarah stirred on the bed next to Aiden, and I quickly dimmed my phone screen. The knock at the door made me jump. I checked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers standing in the hallway. My stomach dropped. I opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain on. The officers explained they needed to speak with me about the incident at my home. Apparently, Elizabeth had called 911 claiming assault. I let them in quietly, not wanting to wake the kids. They took my statement while I showed them the bruises already forming on my arms from where my husband had grabbed me. They photographed everything, including the mark on my face. Sarah woke up during the questioning. She immediately started defending Aiden, explaining how Elizabeth had been touching him inappropriately. The officers took notes and said they'd need to interview all the children separately at the station tomorrow. After they left, Sarah couldn't go back to sleep. She sat at the small table, picking at the complimentary breakfast muffins we'd grabbed from the lobby earlier. Morning came too quickly. We drove to the police station where a detective interviewed each of us separately. Aiden finally opened up about Elizabeth's behavior, how she would corner him in hallways, touch his chest and arms, and make comments about his body. The detective assured us they took these allegations seriously. My phone finally rang while we waited. It was my husband's sister, Nishi. She screamed at me for abandoning her brother at the hospital, said I was destroying the family. I hung up when she started calling my children liars. 5 minutes later, my mother-in-law Alexandra called. Same accusations, same anger. I blocked both numbers. The detective returned with concerning news. Elizabeth had injuries too, and she was claiming my children attacked her unprovoked. However, the detective said the pattern of injuries on all parties involved supported our version of events. They would investigate the inappropriate touching allegations against Elizabeth and the assault charges against my husband. We couldn't go home. The detective advised us to stay away until things were sorted legally. I called my brother John, who lived 2 hours away. He immediately offered his guest room. No questions asked. During the drive, I finally told the kids about their father's family calling. Sarah grabbed my phone and blocked every number she recognized from that side. John met us at his door with hot soup and warm hugs. His wife Allie had already made up beds for everyone. While the kids settled in, John and I sat at his kitchen table. He listened without judgment as I explained everything. When I finished, he simply said we could stay as long as needed. The next few days blurred together. I met with a lawyer who specialized in family law and domestic violence cases. She filed for an emergency protective order and started divorce proceedings. My husband had been released from the hospital with a concussion from hitting his head when the paramedics moved him. He'd already hired his own lawyer. Elizabeth's mother called me from jail. I almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made me pick up. She apologized for her daughter's behavior, said Elizabeth had always had problems with boundaries and jealousy. She'd been in therapy before, but stopped when she moved in with us. The conversation ended with her begging me not to press charges against her daughter. My lawyer advised me to document everything. Sarah helped me create a timeline of Elizabeth's behaviors, including dates when possible. Aiden finally told us about other incidents, like Elizabeth sneaking into his room at night and sitting on his bed, or following him to friends' houses. Each revelation made me feel like a failure as a mother for not seeing it sooner. The custody battle started immediately. My husband claimed I was alienating Elizabeth and turning my children against her. His lawyer painted me as an unfit mother who encouraged violence. My lawyer countered with the police reports, the documented injuries, and the investigation into Elizabeth's inappropriate behavior with Aiden. During a supervised visit at the courthouse, Elizabeth tried to apologize to my kids. Sarah refused to acknowledge her. Aiden hid behind his sister. Elizabeth started crying, saying she just wanted a real family. The supervisor ended the visit early when Elizabeth grabbed Aiden's arm and wouldn't let go. My husband's family launched a social media campaign against us. They posted old happy family photos with captions about how I destroyed their family. Sarah's friends started sending her screenshots. Some people believed the posts and turned against us. Sarah lost several friends whose parents didn't want them associated with violent children. The school got involved when Elizabeth showed up trying to find Aiden. Security had to escort her off campus. We had to arrange for the kids to enter and exit through different doors and adjust their schedules to avoid any potential contact. The stress was affecting their grades, but their teachers were understanding. 3 weeks into staying with John, my husband showed up at the house. John wouldn't let him pass the front door. My husband shouted accusations, demanded to see his kids, and threatened legal action. John calmly told him to leave or he'd call the police. When my husband refused, John followed through. The police arrived and made him leave, but not before he'd terrified my children who watched from the window. The investigation into Elizabeth's behavior revealed disturbing patterns. Other girls from her previous school came forward with similar stories of boundary violations and inappropriate touching. Her therapist from before the divorce provided records showing a history of attachment disorders and concerning behaviors that were never properly addressed. My husband's concussion symptoms worsened, and he blamed us for his medical bills and lost work time. His lawyer sent demands for compensation. My lawyer responded with our own medical bills and therapy costs. The legal fees were draining my savings, but I couldn't stop fighting. Elizabeth's behavior escalated. She created fake social media accounts to contact my kids. She sent Aiden messages saying she loved him and they were meant to be together. She told Sarah that she'd make sure Sarah never saw her mother again. We had to file cyber harassment charges and get new phones with new numbers. The family court judge ordered a psychological evaluation for all the children. The psychologist's report was damning for Elizabeth, confirming inappropriate intimate behavior, severe attachment issues, and manipulative tendencies. The report recommended intensive therapy and no unsupervised contact with my children. My husband refused to accept the report. He accused us of bribing the psychologist and demanded a second opinion. The judge denied his request and issued a restraining order protecting my children from both him and Elizabeth. He was only allowed supervised visits in a court facility, which he refused to attend. 2 months after leaving, we finally got permission to return home to collect our belongings. Police escorted us. The house was trashed. Elizabeth had destroyed the kids' rooms, cutting up clothes, breaking toys and electronics, and spray painting horrible messages on the walls. She'd even destroyed photo albums of my late husband. Sarah broke down seeing her room. Aiden went silent and wouldn't speak for hours. Insurance covered some of the damage, but the emotional toll was immeasurable. We decided not to return to the house. I put it on the market and started looking for apartments near John. The kids needed a fresh start away from all the memories. My husband's lawyer made one last settlement offer. He wanted the house, no alimony, and for me to drop all charges against him and Elizabeth. In exchange, he'd give up any claim to custody or visitation. My lawyer advised against it, but I was exhausted. The kids were suffering. I countered with a demand for child support for Elizabeth's therapy and our moving expenses. The final court hearing was brutal. My husband painted himself as a victim, claiming I'd turned his daughter into a monster with my favoritism. Elizabeth testified that my children had always hated her, that she'd only wanted to be loved. But when cross-examined about the inappropriate touching, she couldn't maintain her story. She finally admitted to everything but claimed Aiden had led her on. The judge's ruling was comprehensive. Full custody to me, restraining orders maintained, mandatory therapy for Elizabeth, and my husband ordered to pay for all therapy and damages. The divorce was finalized with me keeping most assets due to the domestic violence. My husband was also ordered to attend anger management and parenting classes before any future contact could be considered. As we left the courthouse, Elizabeth broke away from her father and ran toward us. Security stopped stopped her, but she screamed that she was sorry, that she didn't mean any of it, that she just wanted a mom. My heart broke for the damaged child she was, but I had to protect my own children first. We moved to a new town near John. The kids enrolled in new schools where nobody knew our story. Slowly, they began to heal. Sarah joined the drama club and made new friends. Aiden started playing soccer and finally smiled again. We still went to therapy, but the nightmares decreased. 6 months later, I received a letter from Elizabeth. Her therapist had helped her write it as part of her treatment. She apologized genuinely this time, acknowledging the harm she'd caused and taking responsibility. She didn't ask for forgiveness or contact, just wanted us to know she was working on herself. I saved the letter but didn't respond. My ex-husband remarried quickly to a woman with no children. Elizabeth lived with them but continued struggling. We heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd been expelled from another school for similar behaviors. I felt sad for her but relieved we were free from that toxic situation. The twice-monthly adventures with my kids continued, now more precious than ever. We hiked, visited museums, tried new restaurants, and slowly rebuilt our sense of family. One evening, while making dinner together, Sarah hugged me and said she was proud of how I'd protected them. Aiden joined the hug, and for the first time in months, I felt like we'd truly survived. The journey taught me that protecting my children meant more than keeping them physically safe. It meant believing them, validating their experiences, and choosing their well-being over any relationship. The guilt of not seeing the signs sooner still haunted me, but my therapist reminded me that predators are skilled at hiding their behavior. We created new traditions and boundaries. The kids knew they could tell me anything without fear of not being believed. We established code words for uncomfortable situations and regular check-ins about their feelings. The experience had traumatized us, but also made us stronger as a family unit. A year after everything began, we attended Aiden's soccer championship. As I watched my son score the winning goal and Sarah cheer from the sidelines, I realized we'd found our happiness again. The scars remained, but they no longer defined us. We'd chosen each other, protected each other, and emerged whole. That night, as I tucked my children into bed in our new home, I knew we'd truly won our freedom. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Elizabeth's voice came through, soft and pleading. She said she'd gotten my new number from a friend at her old school and needed to talk. Before I could hang up, she blurted out that her dad was planning something, that he'd been meeting with lawyers about getting the house back. I ended the call and immediately contacted my lawyer. Sarah noticed my distress over breakfast. When I explained, she grabbed her backpack and pulled out a folder. Inside were screenshots of social media posts from Elizabeth's new accounts, messages she'd sent to mutual friends, and photos of Elizabeth hanging around Aiden's soccer practice. My daughter had been documenting everything without telling me. The messages showed Elizabeth asking about our new address, our schedules, which stores we shopped at. I drove the kids to school with extra vigilance, checking mirrors constantly. At work, I couldn't concentrate. My coworker Endra noticed and pulled me aside. I'd confided in her weeks ago about our situation. She mentioned seeing a man who matched my ex-husband's description in the parking garage yesterday, just sitting in his car. My blood ran cold. That afternoon, I picked up the kids early. The school secretary handed me an envelope that had been dropped off for me. No return address. Inside was a single photo of our new apartment building taken from across the street. On the back, in Elizabeth's handwriting, families should stick together. My hands shook as I shoved it in my purse. We went straight to the police station. The detective who'd handled our case wasn't available, but another officer took our report. He seemed less concerned, suggesting it might just be an attempt to reconnect. I showed him the documentation Sarah had collected, but he said without direct threats, there wasn't much they could do. The restraining order was still in effect, but proving violations required more evidence. John met us at his house that evening. He'd installed security cameras after my ex-husband's last visit, and we reviewed the footage together. There, clear as day, was my ex-husband's car driving slowly past the house multiple times over the past week. In one clip, Elizabeth was visible in the passenger seat, taking photos with her phone. My lawyer filed for an emergency hearing about the restraining order violations. The court date was set for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, she advised varying our routines, staying vigilant, and documenting everything. I hired a security company to patrol our apartment complex, depleting more of my savings. 3 days later, Aiden came home from soccer practice visibly shaken. His coach had found him in the equipment room with Elizabeth. She'd somehow gotten onto school grounds wearing a volunteer badge. She'd cornered him, touching his face, saying she missed him, and that they belonged together. The coach had pulled her away and called security, but she disappeared before they arrived. The school implemented new security measures, requiring photo ID for all visitors and volunteers. They assigned a staff member to walk Aiden to and from practice, but the damage was done. He started having nightmares again, waking up screaming about someone being in his room. I moved his bed into Sarah's room and slept on the couch where I could watch the front door. My ex-husband's sister Nichi started showing up at my workplace. She'd wait in the lobby, trying to intercept me during lunch. She claimed she just wanted to talk, to work things out for the family. Security eventually banned her from the building after she caused a scene, screaming that I was destroying her brother's life. Then came the letters, not threatening exactly, but unsettling. They arrived at my office, at John's house, even at the kids' schools. All from Elizabeth, all variations of the same theme. She was sorry, she'd changed, she just wanted her family back. Each one mentioned specific details about our daily lives, proving she was watching us somehow. Sarah's new friend invited her to a sleepover. I called the parents, verified everything, and dropped her off. 2 hours later, Sarah called in tears. Elizabeth had shown up at the house claiming to be Sarah's sister who was supposed to pick her up. The friend's mother had almost let her in before Sarah saw her through the window and screamed. They called the police, but Elizabeth left before they arrived. I pulled both kids from school for a week. We stayed with John and Allie, rarely leaving the house. My boss was understanding but warned I couldn't take much more time off without risking my job. The kids were falling behind in their studies. The life we'd rebuilt was crumbling again. During the emergency hearing, my ex-husband appeared with a new lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who immediately went on the offensive. She claimed we were paranoid, that Elizabeth was simply a troubled teen trying to reach out to her family. She presented character witnesses who testified about my ex-husband's community involvement and Elizabeth's progress in therapy. Our evidence seemed to shrink under her scrutiny. The photos could have been taken by anyone. The school incidents were Elizabeth's word against ours. letters. The letters weren't threatening, just sad. The judge seemed swayed by their arguments, especially when Elizabeth took the stand, crying about how much she missed us, how sorry she was, how she just wanted to apologize in person. But then Sarah asked to speak. The judge was reluctant, but my lawyer pushed. Sarah calmly presented her documentation, including recordings she'd secretly made of Elizabeth's phone calls. Elizabeth's voice was clear, talking about how she'd make me pay for taking her dad away, how Aiden would be hers eventually, how she knew where we lived and when we were alone. The judge's expression shifted. He ordered Elizabeth to undergo immediate psychiatric evaluation and extended the restraining order, but he also reduced some of the restrictions, allowing supervised phone contact if Elizabeth's therapist approved. It felt like a partial victory at best. That night, John's security cameras caught movement in the backyard. By the time he checked, whoever it was had gone, but they'd left something behind. A photo album, water-damaged but recognizable. It was one of the albums of my late husband that Elizabeth had supposedly destroyed. Inside, all the photos of him had been replaced with pictures of my ex-husband. I couldn't sleep anymore. Every noise made me jump. I installed my own cameras in the apartment, downloaded safety apps on all our phones, and taught the kids additional self-defense moves. Sarah started carrying pepper spray. Aiden wouldn't go anywhere alone. We were living in fear again. My ex-husband's lawyer sent a formal letter demanding visitation rights, claiming the restraining order was excessive. She argued that keeping a father from his children was abuse. I wanted to scream that they weren't his children, but legally, after 5 years of marriage, he had some standing. My lawyer prepared for another battle. Then Elizabeth's mother called again from jail. She was being released early for good behavior and wanted to meet. Against my lawyer's advice, I agreed. We met in a public restaurant, both wary. She looked older, worn down by prison. She apologized again for Elizabeth, then revealed why she'd really called. She'd been getting letters from Elizabeth too, disturbing ones. Elizabeth blamed her for everything, said if her mother had been there, she would have had a real family. But the letters also contained detailed plans about getting us back, about making us pay, about taking Aiden away. She'd kept them all and handed them to me in a thick envelope. The letters were chilling. Elizabeth's obsession with Aiden had deepened into something darker. She wrote about their future together, about removing obstacles, about making Sarah disappear so she could take her place. Some pages were covered in hearts with Elizabeth plus Aiden written obsessively. Others detailed our daily routines with frightening accuracy. I took everything to the police immediately. This time, they took it seriously. A detective specializing in stalking cases was assigned. She reviewed everything and confirmed what I feared. Elizabeth's behavior was escalating. The psychiatric evaluation ordered by the judge had revealed serious personality disorders and delusional thinking. My ex-husband refused to believe it. When confronted with the evidence, he accused us of forging the letters, of turning his ex-wife against him. He showed up at John's house again, demanding to see the originals. John called the police while I gathered the kids in the back room. We could hear him screaming about his rights, about the conspiracy against him. The police arrested him for violating the restraining order. At his arraignment, his new lawyer argued it was a misunderstanding, that he was just a desperate father. But the judge had seen enough. Bail was set high, and additional charges were filed for stalking and harassment. Elizabeth's reaction was immediate. She posted videos online, crying about her dad being in jail because of lies. She tagged everyone she could think of, trying to rally support. Some people believed her. We started getting hate mail, phone calls calling us liars and homewreckers. I had to change our numbers again. The school increased security again after someone called in a bomb threat during Aiden's soccer game. Everyone was evacuated while police searched. They found nothing, but the caller ID traced back to a burner phone purchased near Elizabeth's new school. She had an alibi, claimed she was in class, but I knew it was her. Sarah broke down one night saying she couldn't take it anymore. She missed her old life, her old friends, feeling safe. I held her while she cried, promising we'd get through this. But privately, I wondered how much more we could endure. The constant vigilance was exhausting us all. My lawyer suggested a radical solution, filing for a permanent protective order that would essentially criminalize any contact from Elizabeth or my ex-husband. It was extreme and rarely granted, but given the escalation in evidence, she thought we had a chance. It would mean another court battle, more money I didn't have, more time off work. John and Ailey offered to help financially, but I couldn't accept more of their charity. I took out a loan against my retirement savings instead. The kids needed this to end. We all did. I filed the paperwork and braced for the fight ahead. Elizabeth's therapist reached out asking to meet. She couldn't share details due to confidentiality, but she hinted that Elizabeth's condition was worse than anyone realized. She suggested we consider relocating far away, somewhere Elizabeth couldn't find us. The thought of uprooting the kids again broke my heart, but I started researching options. My ex-husband made bail with help from his family. His lawyer immediately filed countersuits, claiming defamation, alienation of affection, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He demanded damages that would bankrupt me. The legal papers piled up faster than I could read them. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke to the sound of breaking glass. Someone was in the apartment. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the couch and crept toward the kids' room. Their door was open, and I could see a figure standing over their beds. I flipped the light switch and saw Elizabeth holding scissors, reaching for Sarah's hair. I screamed and charged. Elizabeth turned, scissors raised, but I knocked them away with a bat. She lunged at me, scratching and biting. Sarah woke up and started screaming. Aiden jumped on Elizabeth's back, trying to pull her off me. John burst through the front door, having seen the break-in on his security app that I'd given him access to. Together, we subdued Elizabeth until police arrived. She was arrested, still screaming about how we'd stolen her family. The kids were traumatized but physically unharmed. This time, the police took it seriously. Elizabeth was charged with breaking and entering, assault, and attempted assault with a weapon. At Elizabeth's hearing, the full extent of her delusions became clear. She'd been off her medication for months, convinced it was poisoning her. She believed Aiden was sending her secret messages through his soccer jersey numbers. She thought I was holding him hostage, and she was rescuing him. The judge ordered immediate psychiatric hospitalization. My ex-husband's reaction shocked everyone. He accused me of staging the break-in, of drugging Elizabeth to make her act crazy. Even his own lawyer looked uncomfortable as he ranted about conspiracies and setups. The judge ordered him to undergo his own psychiatric evaluation. The permanent protective order was granted. Any contact from either of them would result in immediate arrest and and prosecution. Elizabeth was committed to a secure psychiatric facility for a minimum of 6 months. My ex-husband was ordered to stay at least 1,000 feet away from us at all times, but the victory felt hollow. The kids were more traumatized than ever. Aiden refused to sleep in his own bed. Sarah started pulling out her hair from stress. I took family medical leave from work to focus on their recovery, knowing it might cost me my job. We moved again, this time to a secured apartment complex with doormen and keycard access. John helped us install additional locks and alarms. Every door and window was secured. We lived like prisoners in our own home, but at least we felt marginally safer. The hate mail continued for weeks. My ex-husband's family painted us as villains who destroyed a loving father and his troubled daughter. Some of Sarah's old friends reached out, but their parents wouldn't let them maintain contact. We were pariahs in our own community. 3 months into Elizabeth's hospitalization, her mother reached out again. She'd been granted custody and was moving Elizabeth across the country once she was released. She promised to keep her away from us, to get her the help she needed. It was the first real hope we'd had. My ex-husband's evaluation revealed narcissistic personality disorder and delusional thinking. His family finally began to see the truth. Nishi called to apologize, saying she'd noticed troubling behavior but ignored it. Alexandra admitted Elizabeth had always been difficult, but she'd blamed me instead of getting her help. Slowly, very slowly, we began to heal again. The kids returned to school with individual education plans to help them catch up. I found a new job with understanding employers. We maintained our security measures but stopped living in constant fear. 6 months later, we received word that Elizabeth had been released to her mother's custody and moved to the opposite coast. My ex-husband had lost his job and moved back with his parents. The divorce settlement was finalized, with him owing significant damages he'd probably never pay. We stayed in our secured apartment, slowly expanding our world again. Sarah made new friends at school. Aiden rejoined soccer with a different team. We kept our twice-monthly adventures but stayed closer to home. The hypervigilance remained, might always remain, but we were learning to live with it. A year after the break-in, I watched my children laughing at a school play. They'd survived so much, shown such resilience. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we'd faced the worst and emerged intact. That night, as we shared pizza and played board games, I realized we'd found something precious in our survival, an unbreakable bond forged in adversity. The fear would always lurk at the edges, the possibility that Elizabeth might return, that my ex-husband might resurface, but we'd proven we could face anything together. We'd learned to trust our instincts, to protect each other fiercely, and to never take our safety for granted. Most importantly, we'd learned that family isn't about blood or legal ties, but about who stands by you when the world falls apart. As I tucked my children into bed that night, checking locks and alarms out of habit, I felt a cautious optimism. We'd survived manipulation, deception, betrayal, and danger. We'd adapted and overcome. Whatever came next, we'd face it together, stronger for having survived the storm. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Elizabeth's mother stood at our apartment building's entrance, the doorman calling up for permission. Against every instinct, I agreed to meet her in the lobby. She looked different from our last meeting, healthier somehow, wearing a simple business suit instead of prison clothes. She handed me a thick manila envelope. Inside were Elizabeth's recent therapy session transcripts, legally obtained and shared with her permission. The therapist had documented Elizabeth's elaborate fantasies about our family, detailed plans she'd made, and most disturbingly, a collection of photos she'd taken of us over the past year. Hundreds of them. Us at the grocery store, Aiden at soccer practice, Sarah walking to school, me at work. Some were taken from distances that meant she'd been following us across state lines. Elizabeth's mother explained that she'd discovered these during a room search after Elizabeth had another breakdown. She'd attacked a classmate who reminded her of Sarah, screaming about stolen families. The girl's parents were pressing charges. Elizabeth was back in psychiatric care, this time involuntarily committed after being deemed a danger to others. I asked why she was telling me this. She pulled out another document, a legal petition. She was requesting to terminate her parental rights and have Elizabeth placed in a long-term residential treatment facility. She needed my testimony about the stalking and break-in to strengthen her case. The facility was in Maine, specialized in treating violent, obsessive behaviors in teens. It would keep Elizabeth contained and in treatment until she turned 21. That afternoon, my lawyer reviewed everything. She said testifying would help ensure Elizabeth got the treatment she needed while keeping us safe, but it would also mean reliving everything in court again. Sarah and Aiden would need to testify too. I left the decision to them. They didn't hesitate. Sarah said they'd do whatever it took to end this permanently. Aiden nodded, squeezing his sister's hand. The hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, life continued its new normal. Sarah had started dating a boy from her drama club, a sweet kid named Marcus, who walked her to her car every day. Aiden's soccer team made it to regionals. I'd gotten a promotion at my new job. We were building something again. Then my ex-husband resurfaced, not in person, but through his lawyer. He was suing for damages, claiming we'd destroyed his relationship with his daughter. The lawsuit was ridiculous, but it meant more legal fees. My lawyer countered with our own suit for harassment, assault, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was confident we'd win, but confident didn't pay bills. John stepped up again, organizing a fundraiser through his church. I protested, but he wouldn't hear it. The community response overwhelmed me. People who'd heard our story through John and Allie contributed what they could. Sarah's drama teacher organized a benefit performance. Aiden's soccer team held a car wash. Within 2 weeks, we'd raised enough to cover the immediate legal costs. The night before Elizabeth's hearing, she escaped from the psychiatric facility. The police called at 2 a.m. She'd broken a window and climbed out during a shift change. They had officers searching, but she had a 6-hour head start. We packed immediately and went to John's house, the whole family sleeping in the living room with baseball bats within reach. She didn't come for us. Instead, she went to her father. The police found her at his parents' house, where she'd broken in through a basement window. She was in his old room, surrounded by photos of our family she'd printed from social media, talking to them as if we were there. She'd cut her hair to match Sarah's and was wearing clothes similar to what Sarah wore in one of the photos. My ex-husband arrived while the police were there. Instead of being concerned about his daughter's mental state, he started screaming at the officers, claiming they were harassing his family. He tried to prevent them from taking Elizabeth, physically blocking their path. They arrested him for obstruction. His parents watched from the doorway, finally seeing what their son had become. At the hearing, Elizabeth was brought in wearing restraints. She'd been sedated but kept trying to make eye contact with Aiden, mouthing, "I love you," whenever she could. Her mother's petition was supported by multiple psychiatrists who testified about Elizabeth's dangerous fixation and escalating violence. The judge didn't hesitate. Elizabeth was remanded to the secure facility in Maine until age 21, with possible extensions if she remained a threat. Elizabeth screamed as they led her away, not at her mother or the judge, but at me. She said I'd stolen her life, that she'd get out someday and take back what was hers. The bailiffs dragged her out as she kept screaming threats. Her mother collapsed in tears, apologizing over and over. I told her she was doing the right thing, the brave thing. She was saving all of us, including Elizabeth. My ex-husband's trial came next. His psychiatric evaluation had revealed more than just narcissistic personality disorder. He showed signs of shared delusional disorder, having absorbed and reinforced Elizabeth's fantasies about our family. His lawyer tried to use this for an insanity defense, but the prosecutor argued he'd been sane enough to hire lawyers and plan harassment campaigns. The trial was swift. Multiple restraining order violations, assault, battery, stalking, and conspiracy to commit harassment. The evidence was overwhelming. His own family testified against him, Nishi describing how he'd become obsessed with getting us back, spending hours planning legal strategies and tracking our movements. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and mandatory psychiatric treatment. With both of them locked away, we could finally breathe, but the kids still struggled. Aiden had panic attacks when strangers approached him. Sarah installed 3 different lock apps on her phone and constantly checked them. We continued therapy, working through the trauma as a family. 6 months passed peacefully. Sarah graduated high school with honors, despite everything. She'd been accepted to several colleges, but chose one just an hour away, not ready to be too far from family. Aiden made the varsity soccer team as a freshman. I was promoted again at work, finally earning enough to pay off the legal debts. Then came the letter from prison, not from Elizabeth or my ex-husband, but from Alexandra. She wanted to apologize in person, to make amends for her part in enabling her son's behavior. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, John waiting in his car outside just in case. She looked older, defeated. She told me how she'd always known something was wrong with Elizabeth, how the girl had hurt other children when she was younger, but they'd covered it up, moved schools, made excuses. She thought her son could fix Elizabeth with enough love. Instead, he'd made her worse, feeding her delusions because they matched his own need for control. Alexandra pulled out a check. It was for a substantial amount, enough to cover all our remaining legal fees and then some. She said it was from selling her son's assets, that we deserved compensation for what we'd endured. I tried to refuse, but she insisted. It was the least she could do, she said, for failing to protect children when she should have. That money became the down payment on a house in a gated community with excellent security. The kids each got their own room again, with proper locks and alarm systems. We adopted a large dog, a German Shepherd mix named Max, who slept in the hallway between their rooms. He was trained as a guard dog, but gentle with the family. Exactly what we needed. A year later, we got word that Elizabeth had attacked a staff member at the facility, trying to escape again. Her commitment was extended indefinitely. My ex-husband was denied parole after getting into multiple fights in prison, apparently still ranting about conspiracies against him. Their absence from our lives felt more permanent with each passing month. Sarah thrived in college, studying psychology with a focus on helping abuse victims. She said our experience, as horrible as it was, showed her what she wanted to do with her life. She started dating someone new, a young man who understood her need for security and never pushed boundaries. Aiden grew more confident, his panic attacks becoming rare. He started mentoring younger kids in soccer, teaching them self-defense moves alongside sports skills. We kept our twice-monthly adventures, but now they felt like celebrations rather than escapes. We hiked mountains, visited museums, tried escape rooms where being hyper-vigilant was actually an advantage. The kids still checked locks and looked over their shoulders, but they also laughed freely, made plans for the future, lived their lives. 3 years after that terrible night when everything exploded, we held a different kind of family meeting. Not in crisis, but in celebration. Sarah was graduating college. Aiden had been offered a soccer scholarship. I'd met someone, a widower with his own teenage son who understood the importance of boundaries and blended family dynamics. We talked about the future, about healing, about how far we'd come. The fear never fully disappeared. Elizabeth would age out of the facility eventually. My ex-husband would complete his sentence, but we'd built something they couldn't destroy. A family forged in crisis, strengthened by survival, bonded by unconditional love and fierce protection. We'd learned to trust our instincts, to speak up when something felt wrong, to choose each other above all else. That night, as we looked through photo albums, not the destroyed ones, but new ones we'd created, Sarah pointed out how different we all looked. Not just older, but stronger somehow. Aiden agreed, joking that we should write a book about surviving psycho step-relatives. I laughed, but there was truth in it. We'd survived something that should have broken us. Instead, it had revealed just how unbreakable we were together. The twice-monthly adventures continued, now including my new partner and his son when schedules allowed. But the original 3 of us still had our sacred time, honoring the promise I'd made years ago. Those outings had saved us in a way, maintaining our bond when everything else tried to tear us apart. Sarah still drove sometimes, though not in crisis but in comfort, singing along to the radio as Aiden played navigator. We'd won our freedom not through legal victories or restraining orders, though those helped. We'd won it by choosing each other, by refusing to let manipulation and violence define us, by building something beautiful from the ashes of something toxic. The scars remained, would always remain, but they'd become proof of survival rather than symbols of pain. Our family hadn't ended with tragedy. It had begun with it and grown stronger every day since.